Hey guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. So if you've been following the Whole Lot of Jesus podcast, we had our first season last year, 2024, and we really shared a lot of testimonies. That is like the main mission and goal of the Whole Lot of Jesus podcast, is to tell stories and testimonies of what God has done. Well, last year I interviewed a bunch of different people, had a bunch of different guests on, and it was a growth year for me. I had done a podcast like a couple years before that, but not consistently, and I was just like really busy in school, had a lot going on, was trying to get married, was working a full-time job, and it just wasn't sustainable. And at the season of life that I was in, I just felt like I couldn't handle it all. And so I actually stopped. I think that podcast was like called Seasoned with Grace or something like that. It's not, I don't even think you can find it anymore. We were just on Spotify. I didn't even do YouTube. And, then at the end of 2023, there were multiple confirmations. I really wanted to do a podcast, but I wanted to make sure that it was God led and not just a me idea, but actually a God idea. And he confirmed it in many different ways. So I always say this, but make sure to write down the ideas that you get, because you never know how God can confirm them later on. And so then we started in 2024. And like I said, we interviewed a bunch of different people, had a bunch of different guests on. I thought that's how the podcast was going to go. Every season, like this year, I had it planned to do mini-series and to do a bunch of different mini-series about topics that y'all really engaged in and liked on the podcast. Well, then, this year, 2025 starts, and the Lord really puts on my heart to do more content-related things on YouTube and to really share personal testimonies of what he's done in my life. Now, I a couple days ago already recorded this episode, and the mic that I was using, I can't figure out why. I don't have like a camera. I'm using my phone, or I use my computer, and honestly the camera quality is not the best. So if you're watching on YouTube, I do apologize. I eventually do want to get like a nice vlogging camera, but they are literally hundreds of dollars. I've looked them up. The cheapest one is like $400 to $500. I mean, it goes into the thousands. And so we're slow growth. We're slowly getting there. I have a mic. I at least have a mic. And then I have mics that connect to my phone, but for some reason when I connect it to my phone, the volume's not working. I don't know. It's a DJI little mic, and I'm going to have to ask my husband about it because it worked on my previous phone. I got a new phone. It's not working. I've checked the settings, and I cannot figure out how to attach it. So I have this mic connected literally to my laptop, and then I'm recording on my phone because it's way better quality, like lighting wise and quality wise. And then I'm going to edit the two together, and we're just going to do it that way. Eventually, I would love to get a vlogging camera because, like I titled this podcast, this episode, we're moving into more content-based things. And I will say I'm kind of going to give you a little bit of the backstory and where we're going. If you've been following since the beginning of 2024, you've kind of seen, like, again, we were interviewing a bunch of different guests. And then towards the end of 2024, I got the idea of once a month doing a vlog. That way you can see, like, our life. During this time, and I do want a preference, I'm kind of jumping all over the place, so I hope you can keep up, and I'm sorry. For 2024, the Lord gave me the word shine, and I really felt like it was a mission to be more bold in the faith, to actually use the online platforms that he's given me for his glory and to shine his light. And so I started posting more on social media. Before that, I never really posted much, but 2024 was a year about learning how to consistently post. So I started doing that. And then I will say though, when the Lord was like, be more bold and be more online active in your faith. I did not know, guys, what that entailed. And I really didn't know, like, you're supposed to have a target audience and you're supposed to gear they're called niches. And it's a big marketing fancy term. Sorry, my husband texted me. Okay. It's a big marketing fancy term that basically means a specific category or categories that you are trying to reach. So everyone has a target audience, no matter what industry or what business you're in. Your customer is someone that you're trying to help or trying to reach. And I think that this is important, even as Christians, understanding the type of people that you're trying to witness to and reach and help, because that is really the only essential way that you're going to be truly effective. Yes, there is kind of a balance between being spirit-led, but also having strategy. Like, I feel like it's foolish to just say, oh, I'm just going to lean on Holy Spirit, but I'm never going to strategize. I'm never going to dream. I'm never going to plan. I'm never going to do research. I'm never going to educate myself. You're really setting yourself up for failure. Now, I believe if you're like, I'm going to be so spirit-led and totally on Holy Spirit, He's going to prompt you to learn and be educated and strategize and plan, because that is how He works. But you just can't be a strategizer, planner, researcher. You need both. You need the Holy Spirit, but then you also need a strategy. And I knew this going into it, but I did not know the exact person that I wanted to help and wanted to reach. And so 2024 was really the year of figuring that out. If you follow me on Instagram and on Facebook, on Instagram it's at Carley Rains Author. On Facebook it's just Carley Rains. If you follow me on those platforms, you probably noticed, like, I knew books and I knew stories were going to be a huge one of the niches. And what experts say is usually you have three niches, 3 specific categories of people that you're trying to reach. Once you get like super well known in those categories, you can branch out to other categories, but it's good to start with 3. So I knew stories and books and just fantasy fiction, that sort of stuff was going to be a niche, because I totally feel led in that area. And so I knew that was one of them. But the other 2 niches, guys, I really didn't know. And to say, hey, I'm going to reach Christians is too vague and too broad. And that is something that we need to understand, is that, again, it's a specific person that you are trying to reach and that you are trying to help on the other side of whatever you are doing. And so knowing that person is very essential to coming up with things that are really going to help them. And so if you followed me, I was kind of navigating like who the person was, what I wanted to focus on, things like that. And something that I really want to give you advice in is, don't copy other people. Use them as inspirations, but something that I noticed was, like, I'd be following someone and I really looked up to them and they were a huge inspiration and I saw what worked for them. And so I was like, oh, well, maybe I need to focus on that. And so I would try to focus on that, create content around that, and it was just not successful. And for instance, with YouTube, I felt like he, wanted me to go more active on YouTube. I follow Christians who preach a lot. That is like their primary platform on YouTube, is they're on here, they have the Bible, they're preaching the word, they're going hard. And if you follow me since the beginning, I did a thing called Bible Bootcamp 101. I seriously loved it. We dived into the word. I was, talking about what God was teaching me, what I was learning, all these different biblical topics that we can talk about. But it's funny because I feel like the Lord is like, yes, there will be times where I am, quote unquote, like, preaching, if you will, giving a message. But I really feel like the Lord has really wanted me to open up my life to you guys, which is not ever something I would have thought of. Being like a content creator and just like videoing, vlogging, posting consistent on social media. that is something that I never in a million years ever thought the Lord was going to ask me to do. It was, I love marketing and I do love being creative and I love books and things like that. But I really just thought, I didn't think that was going to be it. I don't know what I thought, but I didn't think that was going to be it. And so it's funny because I just really feel drawn to open up our home to you guys and really showing you guys like the life that Briston and I and our family lives, and not just like preaching at you, but actually showing you and vlogging and just like, again, that's just what I feel like, opening up my home to you guys and letting you guys see more into our personal lives and see more into what we do. And so that was kind of what I really felt led at the end of 2024, the beginning of 2025. And I will say it comes with a cost. Like, it is hard to be vulnerable, talk to a camera, open up our home life and our family life, our business life, things that we do. I will say it's personally for me, it would have been easier if God would have asked to just like lay out the Bible and just preach the message. It would have been way easier to do that. I'm not risking anything. There's no really risk attached to it. But I just felt like he wanted, with the strategy that I'm talking about, he was drawing me to do more of that. So the future of this channel is really shifting. In our first season of the Whole Lotta Jesus podcast, and I'm still going to do the podcast, but we're kind of moving into a more like, I'm going to share personal testimonies and personal things that I'm learning and that Briston and I are going through, and testify to y'all. And then occasionally we're going to have guests on. And that's what I'm thinking for right now. I'm also going to do a lot more vlogs, a lot more day in the life. You're going to go around with us. Briston has a lot of different business endeavors that you're going to see. And that's something that I want to say is, I'm the wife of a business owner. And I feel like as a Christian and also the wife of a business owner, you go through a lot. And I'm not saying if you're not in those categories, you don't go through a lot. But what I am saying is we go through a lot. And I want to be a resource, and I want to help that wife, that mom, that Christian who's on the other side, who maybe works with her husband, whether it's in ministry or it's in business, because technically, if you think about it, the way that a business is laid out system-wise and the way that ministry is laid out system-wise, they're just organizations. The only difference is the labels that they have on them, but really, essentially, they're doing the same thing in terms of how they're laid out system-wise. And I want to help that wife and that mom on the other side, because I have recognized as a stay-at-home mom who works for her husband, who also has her own goals and missions that she wants to pursue, but then also is raising a family and wants to be, the best mom ever. There's a lot that you go through on a day-to-day basis that I don't think people see. And so I just want to open up my experience and what I'm going through, the struggles, the victories, all of that stuff. And just be a resource for that. So one of the categories is stories. That falls into testimonies. That also falls into books and my writing experience and a lot of Bible content, because a lot of my writing is based on the Bible. And then the wife of a business owner, again, we're going to open up to what it looks like with business, stay at home, things like that. The last category, I totally went blank. Oh my gosh. Oh yeah. The last category is based on an organization that I started that I haven't really progressed forward because I didn't really know what the Lord was doing with it, but now I actually have a more specific vision for it. It's called Stewards of Faith. I am a big advocate on stewardship. And when I say stewardship, guys, this is awesome because they kind of tie it all in together. It's called Stewards of Faith, and I got really passionate. I learned in college there are these 7 categories that make up your entire life, and they're called the 7 F's. You have your faith, you have your fitness, your field with it, which is your job, your family, your finances, your fun, and your friends. And those are 7 categories that make up your entire life. And stewarding them God's way can be difficult, especially as a wife of a business owner, a stay-at-home mom who also has dreams, career goals, writing goals, things like that. You wear a lot of different hats. And so stewards of faith and stewardship, we're going to talk really about how to steward your life that portrays and is a godly biblical life, and what that means in today's society, what it means to manage your money God's way, what it means to manage your health and your fitness God's way, and how to balance everything without being overwhelmed, without being, stressed, and finding rest, being productive but not being a workaholic, finding rest but not being lazy. I mean, there's a lot of different topics that we're going to cover. And so those are the three categories. I kind of have labeled them stories, servanthood, and stewardship, because servanthood falls into being a mom, but it also falls into being a wife. So that is really the future of this channel. Again, I am going to really try to post weekly content. I've been more active on the stories, on the short content, getting more consistent in that. And now I'm going to try to weekly do content, and maybe once a month we'll have a guest on. Now, I don't want to commit too much, but it's funny because the other day I was reading in the Word, and right now the Lord has me going through a lot of the Psalms, and I'm actually going to pull it up. Whenever I read the Word, guys, I basically read until something pops out and is drawing my attention. And then whenever that happens, I will pause and I will focus on that thing that's drawing my attention. It could be a verse, it could be a sentence, it could be a word. And maybe I need to look up, what that word means in the original language, or what's the definition of that word, or what that passage means, or whatever it is. But I will stop there. And then whenever I have that moment of discovering whatever it is I feel like God's highlighting, if I feel good, that's it. But if I feel drawn to continue reading, then I will continue reading. And I don't think we should overcomplicate our Jesus time. You don't have to read a certain amount. You could literally read one verse or less than a verse. You could read a little sentence or 2 words or 3 words, and the Lord speak into that and give you some daily bread. So this was a few days ago, and the Lord really put on my heart, this is in Psalms. Again, I've been reading in the Psalms. This is Psalms 96. And a lot of these Psalms in the section that I'm in are talking about singing and giving praise to the Lord, thanksgiving and giving praise to the Lord. And what is so awesome is it is describing God as a king, and it's describing his throne. So if you think of a monarchy, if you think of, if you will, the royal family, or maybe in a fiction book that you read where it's a monarchy and there's a kingdom, I mean, that's the picture that I get. It's talking about his majesty, and it's talking about king above all gods, this great king above all gods, and just describing the beauty of his sanctuary and the strength of him and how he decrees something. And it's just this beautiful language describing him as king. And when you get into Psalms 96, it says, sing to the Lord, bless his name, tell of his salvation from day to day. Declare his glory among the nations. And something that I do want to say is, for this year, for 2025, the Lord has given me the word glory. Now, it's been, my flesh, your flesh naturally wants to be oh, glory, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Is the YouTube channel going to hit off? Or is my social media, or what about book deals? Am I going to get some book deals? Your flesh is how can I get the glory, basically? And we got to be careful of that, guys, because that is essentially what Satan did in heaven. Is he wanted the glory when the glory belonged to the Lord. So I am reminded of the story of Moses. When Moses goes on Mount Sinai, you can find this in Exodus. He goes on Mount Sinai. He spends 40 days, just him and God. And when he comes down the mountain, all of God's people are at the bottom of the mountain waiting for him. When he comes down from that intimate place, and he comes down from the mountain, his face is glowing because of God's glory. He spent so much time in God's presence and in God's glory that now all these people around him are seeing it on his face. And I just got that image where that is what I feel like the Lord is, wanting me to do, is warning me and encouraging me in, is like the secret place. Spending one-on-one time with God is so important. So that way when you go down from the mountain and I'm on here or I'm around people, your face is shining with God's glory. And it always goes back to God's glory, not your glory, God's glory. So this part that stood out in Psalms 96 was the last part. It says, tell of his salvation from day to day, declare his glory among the nations. And this is when I felt like the Lord was gearing me to say, hey, I want you to focus on testimonies in your own personal life that I've done to share with these people. And I'm going to be honest, y'all, I can talk. I can talk. But whenever it comes to sharing things, I don't want to come off as prideful or selfish or arrogant. And so I don't like talking about myself. On here, if we're going to talk about a testimony, I'm not going to think of my own testimony first. I'm going to think of somebody else, because I don't want to fall again in that selfishness, pride, arrogance category. I want to be like the word says, and like Moses was, I want to be humble, I want to be meek, I want to have my eyes turned to other people. But something that the Lord cautioned me from is I'm believing this lie that if I talk about myself, I'm therefore being selfish. And that's not necessarily true. How you can tell if you're being selfish is the motive of your heart and what is the goal when you're talking. So if the goal when you're talking is to bring your own self-glory, like this word's coming to pass, bring your own self-glory and boast in yourself, then yeah, you are being selfish and you are being prideful and you are being arrogant. But if the goal in talking about a testimony that God has done in your life is to bring him glory, then guess what? You're not being selfish. And something that I want to say is, I hope as I'm sharing these testimonies, you see that I don't describe myself as the main character. I hope in sharing these testimonies that I put God as the main character, because then that's going to bring him the glory and not ourselves. So that is a great way to distinguish, okay, if I'm talking about myself, how do I know if I'm being selfish or not? Well, am I the main character? Am I trying to get the glory through what I'm talking about? Or is God the main character and is his power and his glory what I'm going to talk about? So that is the goal, is to have his glory and his power be the main focus and him be the main character. And me just be a side character that all this stuff happened to, but he swooped in and his salvation came and saved me from day to day. So that's why I think I'm going to try to post weekly content, is to literally that verse, tell of his salvation from day to day. Now, something that I want to clarify, if you have been raised in church, you get this. When we talk about salvation, 99% of the time, we think when we come to know Jesus. And that is salvation. Don't get me wrong. That is salvation. But when you read the Old Testament, really, guys, all salvation, I don't want to say all salvation was, because it makes it sound less than what it is. Salvation is a huge thing, but we just put it in this one category of oh, it's when I came to know Christ. Yes, it is when you came to know Christ, but salvation really in and of itself, when it is defined biblically, salvation is when the Lord saves and delivers you from something. So you can be a Christian for 10 years and the Lord save you and deliver you from something. And so it's not just the moment when you came to know Christ. It is salvation. His salvation should be happening at different scenarios and at different times throughout your life. And so if you've been raised in church, I feel like this is a church belief that, oh, salvation, what's your salvation testimony? And also I want to say, testimony is not just when you came to know Christ either. There should be many different testimonies that you have declaring the Lord's glory. Did he save you from a financial stress that happened? Did you get laid off, or was there famine, or whatever it was, that a medical emergency bill that the Lord swooped in and provided for and saved you from? Okay, that is essentially him delivering you from something and saving you. And that is, if you will, a form of salvation. Now, how we understand as Christians salvation is it always points to what Jesus did on the cross. So, for instance, all of these physical scenarios in the Old Testament of him saving them from Egypt and saving them from, the sea parting and saving them, he does salvation multiple times. Like, they get taken into another country and exiled, and it talks about the salvation of the Lord. It's essentially all pointing to the coming Messiah and Jesus Christ dying on the cross, taking the keys of death back from Satan and from his kingdom, dark kingdom, and him resurrecting. And that is essentially like the big umbrella of salvation. But thanks to that big umbrella of Jesus and what he did, we now have these little umbrellas of salvation of where the Lord delivers us in our lives, even after we've come to know Jesus. And so I do want to preference that. So that's really like what my goal is with this new season, is to really declare the glory of God and like what he's done, and share with you different moments where I was really low and Briston and I needed deliverance or needed the salvation of the Lord, and he came in and saved us. And a Psalms that I always point to when talking about the salvation of the Lord is Psalms 107. It is a beautiful Psalms. I recommend you go read it, because I'm not going to share the whole thing. But basically it says, it's titled, Let the Redeemed of the Lord Say So. There's all these different scenarios. There's like 5 or 6 scenarios, and they're all different. But basically, to sum it up, is all these different scenarios, these people tried to do something their own way, and they found themselves in a desperate situation, which is like how we were before knowing Christ. We were desperate. Even after knowing Christ, you can be in desperate situations, but they found themselves in a desperate situation. And one key theme that is repeated throughout the Psalms, it says, then they cried to the Lord in their trouble, and he delivered them from their distress. So those 2 lines repeat themselves like 4 or 5 times in each scenario, and that is the salvation of the Lord. So that is something that I want to hit on as we step into this new season and this new content, is then they cried to the Lord in their trouble, and he delivered them from their distress. And that's what we're going to focus on, is how the Lord, when we cry to him, how he delivers us. And we see this in the story of Egypt with the people. They are slaves. Guys, I want you to understand the significance of Exodus, and I actually have a devotional coming out called Deliverance, Escaping the Bondage of Egypt. It goes over the whole book of Exodus. It's a 90-day devotional. But Exodus is so important in understanding the cross. If you have never read the book of Exodus, please go read it, because it is so significant in so many things that happen when Jesus dies, and his resurrection and his crucifixion and all of that. So Exodus is such a parallel. It's a physical parallel to what Jesus did spiritually for us. And it is beautiful. And so if you don't understand, Egypt made God's people slaves. And so they were bound to the slavery and the harsh treatment of Egypt, because Egypt was this powerful, and in order for you to understand how they were so powerful, you got to go read Genesis. And I have a devotional on Genesis that goes over all the stories of Genesis called Creation. And so it's a great resource if you want to understand the Bible more. But basically, if you know the story of Joseph, when Joseph, he was his dad's favorite. He was Jacob's favorite. Well, his brothers get jealous, so they sell him to become a slave. And so then he works in Potiphar's house, and Joseph gets sent to Egypt. He works in Potiphar's house, and then he gets accused of trying to sleep with Potiphar's wife, which was a lie, and he gets put into prison. And then these 2 officials who worked for Pharaoh, who was the ruler of Egypt, they get put into prison, and Joseph interprets dreams for them. And then way later on, one of the officials remembers, he gets out of jail and goes back to working for Pharaoh. He remembers the dream that Joseph interpreted, because Pharaoh starts having these disturbing dreams and he doesn't know what they mean. And none of Pharaoh's magicians, which I want to do a whole episode on that might be a really cool episode to do, but none of Pharaoh's none of Pharaoh's magicians can interpret this dream. None of what they do in their magic and witchcraft can they interpret the dream. And so he's like, I need someone who can interpret this dream. And the official, remembers Joseph. So he goes and gets Joseph. Joseph interprets the dream. Pharaoh blesses him. He gets out of jail. Guys, he went from literally prison to the second in command. So I just want to encourage us that, and this is a word for me, totally from the Lord, but I want to encourage us that you can be in a really low point and the Lord just promote you and surpass you past all of those people that were in between. Think about it. Prison to second in command. So there's all these titles and positions that are in between prison and second in command. And the Lord just says, nope, we're just going to surpass them all. And I'm going to take you from prison to second in command. And so he becomes second in command. And this is the whole point of why I was bringing this up. A famine happens in the dream that Joseph interpreted. God said 7 years of abundance for the land and 7 years of famine. So when the famine happened, Joseph, which this goes into our stewardship category, Joseph, during the 7 years of abundance, was so smart, guys. And if the devil tries to tell you that saving as a Christian is not biblical, you can go to this story and prove him wrong, basically, with the word of God, because his 7 years of abundance, and this is also in my Be Generous planner and devotional, which is also available on Amazon. It is a personal finance planner and devotional to help you learn how to be generous and steward your money and steward your life God's way. But God told him 7 years of plenty. And during those 7 years of plenty, because Joseph was so high in demand, or high in authority, he, throughout the land, throughout Egypt, saved and stored up food in different parts of the region, because he knew, if I don't store up food, these people, when the 7 years of famine happen, are going to die. And so he saved his food. And I just want to tell you, saving is a kingdom principle. I don't know where in the church we got off. I'm going to go on a rant now. I'm kind of getting off topic, but it's okay. I don't know where in the church we got off that saving was demonic. It was earthly. It was a worldly, materialistic concept. It can be if money is your idol. But I'm here to tell you, as someone who greatly values the importance of managing your money for God's kingdom and for God's glory, you must save. A broke person cannot advance the kingdom of God. You can't. You can only do so much. And I just want to say, the Great Commission, we are all called to fill the Great Commission, and we need people to give to those who are physically going out and doing the Great Commission, but by you giving, you are still taking part in doing the Great Commission. It's just like in basketball, like they're called assists. You're assisting the person who's actually shooting the basket and making it. But guess what? You still get, if you will, not glorified, but you still get recognition for assisting them. If you hadn't passed the ball to them, they wouldn't have made the basket. So if you hadn't saved the money and given it to whoever is going out and printing Bibles or being a missionary or whatever it is, they couldn't do it. So saving is a biblical concept. It's just, the question isn't should I save? It's what am I saving for? And that's, I think, where the devil has gotten us, is he has made us assume that saving is a bad thing, when really, guys, saving is the way that we advance the kingdom. And I'm just going to stop there. But again, so Joseph saves, stores up, and when all of these people are in famine during the 7 years of famine, they don't have food, they don't have their livestock dying, all this stuff is happening. Guess where they go? They're going to the person who saved and had the resources. So they're going to Joseph, they're going to Egypt, and they're literally selling their land. They gotta buy the food, and they don't have money or resources to buy the food. Back then they did trade. So the only thing that they can trade is their property and things like that. So Egypt got so powerful and so abundant under Joseph's authority because he saved and he stewarded what God gave him well. So I just want to say, if we want growth in the kingdom of God, we have to steward so well, guys. We have to steward so well what God has given us. He's not going to entrust us with more if we're so foolish with what he already has given us. So that is how Egypt got so powerful. And then the ruler, Joseph dies. All the people are multiplying, all of his brothers, because again, we gotta connect story to story in the Bible. So, Joseph was one of 12 sons. His father was Jacob, and Jacob's father was Isaac, and Isaac's father was Abraham. Now, Abraham received the promise. I just might need to do like a quick go through of, all that. But anyways, Abraham received the promise of God saying, hey, I'm going to make you a great nation. That's who the Messiah came from, who Jesus came from. It started with one guy and his wife. And then he had a son. His son had 2 sons. And Jacob, which was one of the sons, got picked and favored to carry the inheritance. And then Jacob had 12 sons. And the 12 sons came to Egypt because they had a famine. So now they're all in Egypt and they're multiplying. And the 12 sons die because they get old. And everybody's multiplying and doing the gospel, doing the great commandment that the Lord gives in generous of be fruitful and multiply. And so many generations go by that the ruler of Egypt no longer remembers Joseph because Joseph was favored. So for years, the ruler of Egypt, the Pharaoh of Egypt, blessed his people, blessed Joseph's relatives, the people of God, because of Joseph and what Joseph did. Well, it gets to the ruler who no longer knows Joseph, and he treats his people hard, treats Joseph's people, Abraham's descendants, very harshly, and they become slaves. That's where we get into Exodus, and their treatment is so bad. They literally do Psalms 107, and they are so desperate, and they're like in a desert, which they literally are in a desert because Egypt's in a desert, but they're like so desperate and just need the living water, and they just need relief and rest. And so they finally cry out to God, and God hears them, and then that's when God sends Moses to rescue them. And that's the salvation of the Lord. Moses is like a physical representation of Jesus rescuing us from our slavery in sin. So Egypt, if you ever hear a pastor talking about Egypt, he's talking about your past being bound to sin, your old self, the fallen world, bondage, depravity, all of that stuff. That all falls under Egypt. That's why he says, don't go back to Egypt. Don't go back to your old ways. Because the people of Israel kept wanting to do that. But that's the future of this channel. We're going to be talking about stories. We're going to talk about servanthood, and we're going to be talking about stewardship, which I kind of summed that up in everything that I explained. But, yeah, I think that's it. So be sure to keep updated. Be sure to subscribe and follow. I know every YouTube channel says subscribe and follow. But if you want to grow in the Word, if you want to see our life, if you just want to connect and be in this community, subscribe and follow, because I do think that this is going to be helpful for the both of us and to give God glory. And I hope that this becomes one of your favorite channels. That'd be so cool if it became one of your favorite channels. I'm not going to put that, pressure on you, but let me know what you think, how long you've been following me. Again, I've only been on YouTube for a year. So have you been following me since the beginning? Are you just a new subscriber? Since I've been posting shorts, I've been getting quite a bit of new people on here, and I'm excited. But again, guys, when God promotes you, it comes with more responsibility, and I want to steward this platform well, and I want to, have you join the process and the growth as I grow in this process. So, yeah, just give me a like. Let me know what you think. I'll see y'all in the next episode, and it was good chatting with y'all.